When a team has a car as dominant as the Red Bull, it means that most likely their drivers are the only drivers that are really capable of challenging for the championship. Even though seeing the rise of Aston Martin has been fun, whilst the novelty of seeing them challenge for the podium has been cool, neither Aston Martin, Mercedes or even Ferrari are anywhere near being title challengers at this stage of the season. With Red Bull dominating the start of the season, fans and even Formula 1 now are trying to push a potential title fight between Max and Checo, with some people even throwing in the comparison to Hamilton and Rosberg and their title fight as teammates at the beginning of the hybrid era. The problem is, as much as I would love right now to be honestly talking about a title fight between Max and Checo, I am just not buying it. Checo hasn't proven yet that he is a Nico Rosberg level driver, and unfortunately, he hasn't shown yet that he's even a Bottas, Webber, or even Barrichello level driver either. And now, all of this has to be caveated by saying that there is still a hell of a long way to go this season, and Checo has every chance and every opportunity, even as I'm recording this video right now, before the Australian Grand Prix to prove me wrong. And trust me, as a fan, I would love nothing more than a title fight, even if it is just between teammates. I know from some fans that there are questions about if Checo is even allowed to challenge Max, and if he actually feels like he has the support of the team to do so. Luckily, heading into Australia, he actually spoke to the media about exactly this, saying, "Certainly, when I first came to the team, things were very different. Basically, they were just going racing with two cars because they had to, you know? I can say now that I really feel part of the team, really feel I have my place and am well respected. That is something good to have as a driver, and I really believe I have the full support of the team as much as Max does, and that I will have every single opportunity to win the championship as much as Max does. We have got a very strong car, a very strong package, a car I feel comfortable with and am working well with, and a car I also believe that in the direction we take with the development, I can also get the most out of." The problem so far is that in just over 2 years, Checo still hasn't shown that he can actually beat Max when both of them are having a clean weekend. Even if we ignore Rosberg, who obviously was good enough to beat Lewis on multiple occasions, even more traditional number 2 drivers like Bottas, Webber and Barrichello, they all had days where they were genuinely quicker than Hamilton, Vettel and Schumacher. It didn't happen very often, obviously, but that's the difference between a good driver and a great driver. It's that ability to do it race after race, season after season, and under the highest levels of pressure and expectation. Now, it doesn't mean that any of those number 2 drivers, including Checo, are bad drivers. You don't just get a seat at a top team for being okay. But that relentless consistency is what separates the good drivers from the all-time greats. Despite Checo, as I'm recording this video, winning 4 races so far at Red Bull, none of them actually came from Checo being outright quicker than Max during a clean weekend. In Baku in 2021, when Checo had his first win for Red Bull, that was the race where Max was comfortably leading before a puncture took him completely out the race. Monaco 2022 might be the only exception, but even then, when Checo crashed in Q3, we know looking at the data that whilst he wasn't improving, Max behind him was on a lap good enough for the front row. And now, you could also say that in Monaco you should expect crashes and red flags, and so even your first run should be your best because it could be your last. But it was still a weekend where we didn't get to see Max have an entirely clean weekend. In Singapore, Max was quicker than Checo in every single practice session, and he was also quicker than Checo in both Q1 and Q2. It was only because Red Bull made a mistake in underfueling Max's car that then relegated him down to 8th and gave the opportunity for Checo to have a clean run at Leclerc without Max fighting up at the front. And then of course, Jeddah. The whole weekend, Max was on another world. He was fastest in every single practice session. He was also then fastest in Q1 before a drive shaft issue knocked him out of qualifying and opened the door for Checo to have a clean run at pole position. And now I do want to stress something, because at no point does Max having any of these issues mean that Checo was just automatically handed an easy win. He had to fight in Monaco in very tricky conditions to put pressure on Ferrari. He had to nail the start at Singapore to jump Leclerc on pole going into turn 1, and he had to fight in Jeddah on the safety car restart to show that he could actually hold off Max. All of that is true, but we still haven't seen Checo outperform Max, especially for a win, on absolute pure performance when it's just him and Max, with no issues, no caveats, and no external factors that affected their weekend. That is why, to me, as much as people want to mention and try and push that narrative that Max and Checo potentially could be the new Hamilton-Rosberg, the truth is, Checo hasn't yet shown that he can even be the equivalent of Hamilton-Bottas. Looking online and gauging the general feeling of fans, it does seem like there is a bit of negativity and disappointment from the fans about Red Bull having a car as dominant as they do, because we know that a championship challenge is more likely from someone like Leclerc, Hamilton, or even Russell. I think for me, I have nothing against having a dominant car on the grid because it just happens in Formula 1. I definitely think a driver of Max Verstappen's quality deserves the cars that he's been given, because we want to see the best drivers in the world in race-winning cars that can match their talent. Or when it comes to Checo, he also deserves to be in a race-winning team because for so long, very few drivers achieved as much as he did in midfield machinery. I also think that despite all of the noise around Lando potentially being an option for Red Bull, Checo's seat doesn't deserve to be called into question because he has done and he is still doing exactly what the team needed him to do. He has become that missing piece of the puzzle that, for so long with Gasly and then Albon, Red Bull just couldn't find and were actually in a bit of a mess. But I do want to see Checo push Max more for the championship and bring more uncertainty into a pretty predictable season so far. That is why, although fans and even F1 themselves are trying to push this narrative that Checo is a title challenger to Max and maybe even the new Hamilton-Rosberg, I just can't honestly buy into it when we haven't even seen Checo beat Max with a clean weekend for a race win, let alone a championship over a season. Regardless of my doubts, as it stands, Checo is driving better than ever before, and by his own admission, he is in the perfect place with a team and car that he feels gives him the best platform to challenge for a world championship. Even as I am recording and you're watching this video, I would love for nothing more than for Sergio Perez right now to be on pole position and maybe even winning the Australian Grand Prix. I think as fans of the sport, we want to see a competitive season, even if it is just between teammates. Ultimately, I would love for Checo to push Max for the title because in that case, the real winners would be us. But I am just not sure that with Max being as good as he is, that we are going to see anything even close to what we saw between Hamilton and Rosberg.